What is going on, guys? My name is Newton, and today I'm bringing you another Super Senso guide video. Now, this video is going to be a little bit different than what I usually do because I'm kind of go ahead and going over and address a little bit of an issue that I would see a lot of new players are having and a lot of new players have been asking me. So, I'll kind of explain what I'm talking about and go ahead and jump right into it. Now, a lot of new players getting into the game, a lot of people aren't familiar with a lot of the cards. They don't know how to build their decks, they don't know what cards they should be using, and they don't know, positioning and play styles and other things like that. So I'm going to go over a few tips and a few cards that I would say new players should avoid early on, just until you kind of pick up the game a little bit more, you understand the positioning and each of the maps that you do unlock throughout the game. So as I go over that and I say things like that, I'm going to go ahead and talk about first using, cards that have 3 energy. Now, 3 energy cards are primarily a higher cost cards, high damage, and other things like that. Now, they're not necessarily bad, but they're something I would strongly advise new players to kind of stay away from because they could lead to a lot of losses and potentially giving your enemy a lot of free and easy victories. So let's go over kind of what I'm talking about. Let's go ahead and jump into the info section for some of these cards. Now, starting off, the Super Tank. It's a higher cost card. It costs 9 mana, but it gives the enemy 3 charge. And along that, the Siege Tank does that, the Sky Fortress does that, and then not only that, but the Mothership as well. Now, other cards that will give your enemy 3 energy are your Sensos. So basically, if you lose your Senso, you understand how detrimental that is to yourself and how much of an advantage it gives to your enemy. Now, there are other cards, like I said, I'm going over right here, that do give your enemy 3 energy. Now, these cards are very, very strong, but the thing is, what I notice about a lot of new players is a lot of you new players play very, very hyper aggressive with lack of thinking about position and how you're going to approach on each individual map. Now, is playing hyper aggressive bad? No, absolutely not. There's definitely decks and playstyles that do kind of coincide with each other and really complement that playstyle, but early on it's really about building a well, neutral, and balanced deck and understanding the game and the maps itself. Now, time after time, a lot of people have asked me on YouTube and on my streams, is Sky Fortress a good card? Should I roll Sky Fortress? It does a lot of damage. Why don't you recommend that I use it? Well, to be honest, if you're a new player, you're sitting at that 100 to 500 star bracket, not saying that you're bad, but you probably don't understand a lot of the positioning and how to be using heavy hitter cards like this. Now, like I said, a lot of new players will come in and play very, very aggressive. So if you're coming in playing very aggressive, especially with a card like this, yeah, it can do a lot of damage, it can take out a lot of units, but if you're playing aggressive with a card like this and you're not sitting back to pick off units, once this is dead, it's basically a free strike or a potential lead up to a 1-3-3-7 that lead damage for your enemy. So that's why, like I'm saying, is kind of going over, repeating myself a few times here, but I'd really encourage a lot of new players to avoid these heavy cost cards, these heavy hitters, until you kind of get an understanding of how to build a well-balanced deck and where these heavy hitter cards kind of shine. Now, let's go ahead and talk about a little bit of where a lot of these cards do really, really well. We'll start with some of the more common ones, like the Super Tank. Super Tank's not that bad, has a ton of health, does some decent damage, has 2 armor, so it's a very, very tanky card, and as it should be, it's a Super Tank. But if you're playing this on the front lines and you're playing very aggressively, you better hope that you have some other cards kind of backing you up, following on in with you, and you're kind of creating a line of heavy aggression. If you're kind of just calling this in as a last resort, like, oh, I have 9 gel, I'm going to call it in, I'm going to take out some units, and he can really touch me. Well, if he comes in with a sapper, a boomer, anything like that to start shredding armor and getting heavy damage in, essentially this card could die very, very quickly. So, like I said, these cards do a lot of good damage, but they do have a position in a place to be used in certain decks, and I don't think it's really well advised to be putting into new decks, especially if you're a new player. Like I said, same could be said for a Siege Tank. Once again, has some armor, very high health, decent damage. Same with the Sky Fortress. Sky Fortress is a very interesting card, and I would say a little bit more viable than some of the heavy tanks, because you can keep this card back, but once again, this card doesn't have any actual armor. So if you go in the info section, he doesn't have any armor, but he has siege damage, and he has a good amount of health with some decent damage. But the thing is, with this card, you can't play him aggressive. You got to sit back and you got to kind of pick off units. But if the enemy's coming in hard and, making that hard approach, once this card goes down, it's a very, very hard loss for you, and then the same could be said for the mothership. Basically, okay health of the mothership, damage is very high on it, and then 1 armor is a little bit more of a tankier card. But I mean, that's kind of what I really wanted to go over today, and kind of a quick tip to advise newer players is really to avoid these kind of main cards. Once you start understanding the game a little bit better, and you get a good understanding of, like I said, the positioning is very, very huge in this game. How you're going to make your openers, how you're going to do your mid game, and how you're going to finish off your enemy. Once you kind of get a good understanding about that, and you kind of have a tank with a clear goal in mind, that's when I'd recommend start using these higher gel, higher cost cards, because not saying that they're bad once again, but they do have a place in every single deck. So kind of wanted to make a little video kind of addressing some of these things, because a lot of people did ask me, especially with the Sky Fortress. People ask me all the time if they should be rocking Sky Fortress in their deck, and then this video is kind of going over basically my thoughts of whether or not you should be rocking the Sky Fortress. Some people are ready, some people understand the game very, very well, but for new players, it's not something I would suggest. But I mean, that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about in this video. Just kind of a quick tip and addressing some things that people talk to me and ask me very, very often. If you guys have any other questions or anything like this about what cards you should be rocking, some other cards you guys should stay away from, and other things like that, go ahead, leave it in the comment section down below, or feel free to catch me anytime that I'm streaming, because I'm always down to talk about some stuff about Super Senso and give you guys all kinds of tips as much as I possibly can. But if you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. But as always, guys, like I always say, don't forget to have fun while you're playing Super Senso.